Hi, everyone. So congratulations. These are the last notes of Unit 3. It is about reproductive strategies, and this is where you're taking notes on this pale blue document. I'm going to show a PowerPoint with me talking over it, but if you want to check yourself or use a different source of information, down here on that same document is a little table that outlines everything that you're about to learn. Okay, so you should be watching this Monday, April 20th, and this is about reproductive strategies. So the big question that is being answered, we already know, where do new cells come from? Existing cells. And then today is about where do new organisms come from? And they come from existing organisms because organisms are made of cells. Okay, so there are two strategies. There's asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. We're going to go through asexual first. A as a prefix when it's put in front of a word means not something. So asexual, not sexual reproduction. And the organism reproduces without fertilization. So without sperm and egg. Here are some examples of organisms that do that. Okay, so the mechanism of asexual reproduction, there are three types. There's budding, where a new organism grows by mitosis on the body of its parent. An example is the hydra. So look down here at that picture of budding. Here's a hydra, and there's a little outgrowth, and it buds off, and then it's a new organism. Then there's fission. This is cell division in prokaryotes, forming two identical cells. An example is bacteria. So here is one parent bacteria cell. It divides into two, and now it's two organisms. Regeneration. This is when an offspring grows from a piece of its parent. Example, sea stars. So here's a sea star, and its leg broke off, and this larger one has its leg grow back, and this one can grow a whole nother organism from that leg. That's called regeneration. So some advantages of asexual reproduction is time. Organisms can produce rapidly, and then number of offspring are kids, can produce many children at once. So here is a video of bacteria growth. Look, we started with one, and then two, then it doubles. You can see in a short amount of time, there are a ton of offspring. Cool. Okay, so some disadvantages. Genetic variation. So children have the same DNA as their parents. They are genetically identical. So there's not genetic variation. Mutations. If a parent has a harmful mutation, the child will also inherit it. So let's say that here's a mutation. Every single one of the offspring from the organism with a mutation will get the mutation. Some examples, so I already talked about these, but budding with the hydra, so there's a hydra, it's a marine organism. Bacteria, fission, that's when it splits into two. And then regeneration, that's when a fragment of it, like this sea star leg, breaks off and then can regenerate a whole organism. Okay, now on to sexual reproduction. So definition. This is when genetic material from two different parent cells combine and produce genetically unique offspring. The mechanism is fertilization. So an egg and a sperm unite to form a zygote. So you need two different cells that fuse together to form one, which is called a zygote. And then that zygote is going to divide and divide and divide. Some advantages are that there is diverse offspring, meaning that the offspring are genetically different. So look at these two giant families. Every single person in that family has genetically unique DNA. Okay, you get your DNA from your parents, but you get 50% from your mom, 50% from your dad, and it gets all scrambled up. So they're all going to have genetically unique offspring, unless they are identical twins. Okay, some disadvantages is it takes time. So organisms have to grow and develop until they can produce sex cells, and that's puberty, when your body grows up and is able to reproduce and make sperm and egg. Energy. So it takes energy to search and to find a mate. And then number of offspring. So In sexual reproduction, there's usually a small number of children. So here's a dog with 6 puppies. Think about the number of offspring that humans have in their lifetime. It's way different from a bacteria being able to make billions in a short amount of time. And some examples, the only real example is fertilization, where sperm and egg meet. So here's some sperm, and then there's an egg. You can see the sperm burrows in, fertilizes the egg. Only one of them can. And then here's a plant, because sexual reproduction also happens in plants. So there's sperm and egg in the pollen, and then in a different part of the plant you can see in the diagram. Okay, so here's some cool things from nature, because as always, everything that we learn in biology, there are exceptions. So here are some interesting things that have to do with reproduction and gender in nature. So, are there any animal species that are all one sex? Yes, there's these lizards called whiptail lizards, and they reproduce by parthenogenesis. It's asexual reproduction. They are all female, and they are hybrid clones, meaning that they, like, there's a mother and then gives, like, it has offspring that are genetically identical to the mother, or they have DNA only from the mother, but it's a hybrid because it gets mixed up. And then they have pseudosex, which is for ovarian development. There's not actually sperm and egg that's involved. Okay, what would you think about this situation? So this is real. A female hammerhead shark was captured as a baby in the Florida aquarium, for the Florida aquarium. 3 years later, she gave birth to a baby shark. There had never been any males in the tank. So how is this possible? So at first, scientists were thinking maybe she stored sperm for 3 years. Maybe she mated with another species of shark in the tank, but then they did some DNA analysis, and it turns out that nope, it was asexual reproduction. So the baby hammerhead shark had no trace of paternal father DNA. There was just DNA from the mother. And basically, an unfertilized egg got fertilized by another smaller egg. Okay, so worms, snails, slugs, barnacles, and other organisms are hermaphroditic. So what does that mean? That means that those organisms have both sperm and eggs, and this is usually going to be in organisms that are solitary creatures, so they're not going to run into that many other slugs in their lifetime, for example, and they can't take the chance that it'll be the wrong gender that they run into, and then they can't reproduce. So here is a very cool video. This is showing leopard slugs mating.
Then suddenly the pair release their hold on the branch and start to slide downwards on a rope of mucus.
So this is 2 slugs twisting around each other.
Now, in midair, they move to the next stage in their pairing. Each everts its male organ from just behind its head.
So now what you see coming up, like he said, that's the male
These
organ, so that's what
longer
has sperm.
and longer. Then they too begin to entwine. They fan out to form a translucent flower-like globe. And now, at last, sperm passes from one slug to the other. The transfer is complete. Each has been fertilized. Finally, their strange balletic relationship comes to an end with a bump.
Okay, so basically both of those slugs were male because they have that male organ filled with sperm, but they are also both female because they fertilized the egg of the other slug. So they are simultaneously both male and both female. Okay, are there any organisms where the male carries the offspring and gives birth? You might know this one. Yeah, seahorses. So seahorse males get pregnant and give birth. The female deposits about 1,500 eggs into the male's pouch. The male fertilizes and carries eggs for 9 to 45 days. Male releases the young and gives birth. And here's a video of that. Up to 2,000 babies. Fewer than 5 in 1,000 will survive to adulthood. All right, last thing, in sexually reproducing species, why do males and females have such different appearances? So for example, look at these deer and these birds and ducks and peacocks and baboons. There's a big difference between the male and the female. And that is because of sexual selection, differential mating success. So we'll learn next unit about genetics and evolution and how basically the male and the female will look very different for that reason. Okay, last one, deep sea anglerfish. So these pictures show both the male and the female anglerfish. What you see, this main fish is the female, and then what you see in that circle, and then here at the bottom and here at the top, that's the male. So basically, the male is very tiny, cannot hunt, cannot eat, and has extra sensitive olfactory sense, which means really good sense of smell. And basically, the goal of this little tiny male fish is to find a female and latch on and bite her and stay there, kind of like a parasite, and deposit sperm. So the male cannot really survive on its own for that long, and its whole life goal is just to find a female so that it can then reproduce. All right, that's it for reproductive strategies, and let me know if you have any questions.